Hi, I'm Toby.
I'm Connie. I'm Jack. I'm Zara.
I'm Harry.
And we're here for Parliament Week 2011, finding out some stories of democracy
and how we and you can make a difference.
Nose to the left, 16. Eyes to the right, 283.
I declare the bill of abolition of the slave trade to be passed.
Can you tell us about a time you've done something to make a difference?
Well, I think one of the things I did to make a difference was actually to take part in some non-violent direct action. So I took part in a big protest outside the Faslane nuclear weapons place up in Scotland.
I was asked to be Chief Inspector of Prisons. I think that enabled a lot of changes to be made, and it also resulted in healthcare for prisoners being put into the NHS, which it had never been before.
The police raided a big camp where they suspected people were being held as more or less slaves, and I was part of a group of people who led a kind of campaign with the government, along with Anti-Slavery International and Liberty, to criminalise forced labour and domestic servitude.
In 2001 I went back to Afghanistan to visit it, and I found a tiny little school in a mud hut in a ruined building, which there were 30 pupils in 3 shifts. I decided that I believed in this little experiment, this school, and I was going to fund it. So I came back and asked just lots of friends whether they'd contribute some money. And it's now got 3,000 pupils. And in the last 3 years, all their so-called sixth form have gone on to university.
We had a debate in the House of Lords, and I spoke in that debate, and I think I made my best speech ever in that debate. And the whole movement started to allow the Gurkhas to carry on and stay here. As a result of that one debate, and I hope my speech made a big difference, we managed to get the government to change their mind.
The time that I think that perhaps I had some impact was when I led a campaign on HIV and AIDS. And the only thing you could do was public education. You could tell people of the dangers and how to prevent it. And I think the result of that was that lives were saved.
Which film do you think has made a difference?
Cry Freedom, because it brought to my attention the horrors of what was happening in South Africa under the apartheid regime.
Papers.
What's your name, Gaffer?
It's there in the book.
Say it! Say your name!
All Quiet on the Western Front. And this was a very realistic film about the First World War, and it showed the horror of war. And I can remember to this day the impact that it had upon me.
See that? What's that mean? Bombardment.
Cathy, Come Home. It is an absolutely heartrending story, but what it did at the time was to highlight the issue of homelessness. You know, if you don't have a home, you can't begin. You can't begin to be a citizen of this country. You can't participate.
People were so affected by this true life story that they set up the organisation called Shelter. So it didn't just change me and influence me, it influenced a whole generation of people to do more for homeless people.
Birmingham, 39,000 families on the waiting list. Leeds, 13,500. Liverpool, 19,000. Manchester, nearly 15,000.
It wasn't long before I realised something. We've been lucky to get the old place. There didn't seem to be anything for us anymore.
The King's Speech. It is about King George VI, who had a most appalling stammer. I think it's really inspiring.
Is surely the mere primitive doctrine that might is right.
I'm 15 right now, I'm not eligible to vote, but can you tell us about things that young people like myself can do to participate in democracy?
I think there's all sorts of things you can do to participate, because democracy is wider than just parliamentary affairs.
Democracy is a work in progress, so young people have got to be engaged in it to change it and make it better. Of course, you vote ultimately at 18. I think it's about watching the news and being interested.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about writing to MPs when you think they say stupid things or you disagree with them. It's about lobbying for things that you care about.
Get yourself really informed about what's going on in the world around you. That's the key. Information and knowledge are power.
Get online, get involved in blogging, perhaps commenting on articles that you see, using social media and having an influence. And as we've seen all over the world, activism online can actually really change politicians and governments' decisions.
It might even be down to where you shop and the kinds of things that you buy, to make sure that you're not buying something which is leading to hardship elsewhere.
I don't know if your school has a school council, but many do, and if it doesn't, then go and set one up, because I think it's really important that young people have a say in the way their schools are run.
You can join a political party. And the only way in which political parties can be effective is if more people join. If you can't join that, there are a lot of other organisations that take a political view about environmental issues, about human rights issues and so on, and they too, I think, can benefit from more young people taking an active part.
I think you have to find what you're passionate about, what you really, really care about.
A young person makes a difference in their community by being engaged in any way whatsoever. If you're an artist, make some art and submit it. You could be in the Scouts, you could be in the Brownies or the Guides. You could be a young filmmaker, as you're doing here. That's an incredibly interesting career. Maybe you start a band with your friends. Anything you do that is creative, that is going to make a difference and is going to have an impact. Volunteering at a local old people's home directly affects your community. Life is politics.
It's not just a matter of voting, but I think when it then does come to having a vote, then you've got a bigger experience of what life is like outside and what life is like for a lot of people.
You're only going to have a voice, you're only going to be able to do something if you take an interest. Understand what democracy is all about, understand how hard for centuries people have fought for that freedom, which we now have and take for granted.
What is of primary concern and of importance is when you get the right to vote, you must exercise it.
Which films do you think have made a difference?
Star Wars, I don't think it's ever been bettered. What it did for me is it made me sort of ambitious, and it gave you a sense that anything was possible.
Your destiny lies along a different path from mine. The Force will be with you, always.
One film that I hardly remember now, but I remember being very much affected by it at the time, was Hotel Rwanda. And I think the attitude of people in this country, of all ages, has been greatly affected by that sort of film which says, you know, we're all in the same world together.
Soon, all the Tutsis will be dead.
You do not honestly believe that you can kill them all.
And why not? Why not? We are halfway there already.
Slumdog Millionaire, which was a British-made film about India and about the way in which a section of the community there lives.
Gandhi, it captures the story of a country getting its freedom, and it captures a story of people fighting for their democracy and eventually getting their democracy.
You don't think we're just going to walk out of India?
Yes. In the end, you will walk out. Because 100,000 Englishmen simply cannot control 350 million Indians if those Indians refuse to cooperate.
Back to the Future. It shows that the little things that you do in your daily life could have huge implications on the future, not just your future, but other people's.
Talk about the future.
No! Marty! We've already agreed that having information about the future can be extremely dangerous. Even if your intentions are good, it can backfire drastically.
Who's your most inspirational person?
A man called David Lloyd George. He wasn't just a great Prime Minister, but he was a passionate person about changing the world and having a fairer Britain.
My mother was very important because I was raised by a single mother. I didn't have a dad, and I saw her do everything really to raise our family. I had some great teachers, So my heroes are local heroes, they're local people.
I actually believe in teams, and I think if you look at leaders, they always get the applause, you know, look at what they've done. Actually, it's all about teams.
I would certainly say Elizabeth I. I mean, how amazing was she? If you just imagine what she achieved, that is also amazing.
Mahatma Gandhi, he started the non-violent movement of protest.
Nelson Mandela, the way in which he was able to, not be vengeful in his response to being free.
I mean, I lived in South Africa for a while during the time of apartheid. It was a beautiful country, and underneath the degree of repression was huge. And for Nelson Mandela to have fought that with such moral courage over so many years and to emerge as a leader of his people was just amazing.
I was a soldier, and the soldier who was a role model, if you like, to me was Field Marshal Viscount Slim. He was a leader who extraordinarily got devotion from people because he understood them.
It was all the women in my immediate family, my mother, my aunts, my grandmothers. It didn't matter what life threw at them, they managed to deal with it with no small grace.
The 80s, for me, were a decade that were defined by two strong women. One of them was Margaret Thatcher and the other one was Madonna. The one question I would like young people to ask themselves is, if that man or woman can do it, why can't I? What makes them better than me? Absolutely nothing. And if it can be done, you can do it.
We've met some interesting people and heard some great stories. And picked up some ideas on how we can make a difference. What will you do?